Good morning. Welcome. I'm Kim Mosley, president of the Los Altos Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us this morning. I would like to start by, introducing ourselves for our honored guest, and then I will do a brief introduction of Nick Ortiz, Vice President and Small Business Advocate from CalChamber and the Western Association of Chamber Executives. So Kathy, could you start off for us?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Kathy Lara. I'm on the board of the chamber, and I'm also with the Los Altos Town Crier.
Joe?
Yes, sorry, I just noticed my title is still in my other capacity. I'm Joe Beninato on the steering committee for Los Altos Community Coalition and also vice chair of the Planning Commission, although not here in that capacity.
Great. Jonathan Cohen.
Hi, John Cowan, Executive Director of Government Relations and Community Partnerships at El Camino Health.
And Scott Hunter.
Good morning, Scott Hunter. I'm the Executive Director of the Los Altos Village Association.
And Scott O'Brien.
Scott O'Brien. I'm a commercial real estate broker, former chamber board member, and so just here to hear what you have to say today.
Mimi.
Good morning. My name is Mimi Lee, and I'm here. I'm also on the board of directors, and I recently sold my Curves of Los Altos franchise.
And Anthony.
Hi, everyone. Anthony Carnesecca, assistant to the city manager for the city of Los Altos. I manage economic development as well as a couple other umbrellas within the city.
And Chris, we were just going around with introductions, and if you'd like to introduce yourself as well.
Hi, everyone. Yes, sorry, I'm being late a little bit. My name is Christina. I'm a new member of Chamber of Commerce. I'm joined like last month, and I'm very new to the community as well. So my business is a nail salon in Los Altos. We do a little bit different technique, like European manicure. I'm happy to be the new member and to participate in the community events and all different stuff.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christina. So with that, I would love to introduce Nick Ortiz. I'll read a short bio here for Nick, and then we'll get started. So Nick joined the California Chamber of Commerce in February of 2023. I was very excited to see that he had taken on this role for our organization, and became the Small Business Policy Center advocate, assuming the role of Vice President of Small Business Advocacy. The center focuses on mobilizing the power of small businesses and grassroots advocacy at the state capitol, building on the CalChamber legacy of partnering with local chambers across the state to improve California's business and jobs climate. It's very important. In addition to enhancing the efforts of small business employers to let policymakers know how government requirements affect the day-to-day workings and profitability of small companies, Ortiz continues to serve as an information resource for and CalChamber liaison for local chambers of commerce. Sorry. Before joining the CalChamber team, Ortiz was president and CEO of the Greater Bakersfield Chamber of Commerce during his tenure there from April of 2015 to February of 2023. The Bakersfield Chamber experienced membership and revenue growth and successfully executed several key initiatives, including the Bakersfield Kern Regional Branding Initiative, a campaign to pass Measure N, the City of Bakersfield Public Safety and Vital Service Initiative, and the launch of B3K Prosperity, and most recently bringing the California Economic Summit to Bakersfield. His previous experience includes positions with Western States Petroleum Association, PG&E, Assemblywoman Nicole Parra, and the United Way of Silicon Valley Leadership Group. Nick is a graduate of the University of California, Santa Cruz. With that, I have two more guests in the waiting room that I will admit. And I will give you the floor, Nick. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Thank you, Kim. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity to join you all this morning and to talk about just a quick update of what we're doing at CalChamber, what kind of happened in the legislature, what's going forward, and then also some trends we're seeing around the state in terms of how voters feel about various issues as we plan for the legislature to reconvene in January. I have a couple of PowerPoints. Do you mind if either you could enable sharing or make me the co-host so I could share?
Yes. There you go.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So here's kind of what I'd like to do, like my overall agenda is just a legislative overview, kind of a look ahead as well. I will switch gears and talk about our annual People's Choice Survey, and then kind of discuss some other research that we're really hanging our hat on in terms of the role of the business community around a range of issues. So just to give you a quick recap, where we found ourselves at the beginning of this year, it has been a whirlwind. There was significant turnover in the legislature. We saw nearly a third of the legislature turn over because of term limits. So there's 80 assembly members, 40 state senators, so 120 total. Out of that 120, we had 34 new legislators in 2023, 27 in the assembly, 7 in the state senate. So significant amount of turnover. We are expecting a slightly lower amount of turnover for the 2024 cycle, so the legislature that would convene in 2025, but probably the next round and the really only opportunity to almost change the makeup of the legislature before it's set for basically 12 years of term limits is in the 2024 election. What I can say about this legislature is if you look at it, one, this is the most Democrats that have been in the legislature. They not just have a super majority, they have a super duper majority. And the legislature, I think you could say, is like the youngest, the most diverse, the most politically progressive. And then also, and this is not meant to harp on anyone in particular, but really when it comes to their overall experiences as either being involved in government or being elected officials themselves, the least experienced legislature as well. So that definitely causes some issues. There was a record number of bills introduced this year. We had over 2,600 bills that were introduced by the deadline in February. And there was significant pressure on the governor because out of those 2,600 bills, 40-ish% of them actually made it out and made it to the governor's desk. That's an incredible amount of legislative throughput that really is not matched by other states. And the governor ultimately signed just under 1,000 bills and vetoed 169 bills. And so the governor's staff will tell you as they were working through all of that, that was a significant amount. And it's really been interesting for us, processes that we had used or, venues that we could look at to the legislature to kind of curb the number of bills that were actually making it through the full process, just really weren't options this year. So generally, there's kind of 3 main steps in each house. So, bills are introduced, they have to go through policy committees. If they have any fiscal impact, they have to go through fiscal committees. The last being the appropriations committee. There is what's called the appropriations suspense file, where the chair has great discretion to keep bills in there. We didn't see the chairs use the suspense file in the way that had been used in the past. Once fiscal committees report, they go to the floor. There's the House of Origin deadline. So if a bill is introduced in the Assembly or the Senate, it's got to make it out of that house in the summer. They reconvene in late summer to go to consider all the bills that were moved over from the other house. And then they go through that process again of policy, fiscal committee, floor votes. Again, just the amount of bills that actually made it out, and the number of bills that aren't actually, even though you see 1,166 bills there, the number of bills that aren't actually dead, that were just like converted to what are called 2-year bills because the legislative session is 2 years, is extraordinary. So we have our work cut out for us as the business community next year around a range of things that are gonna pop back up. Just in terms of like highlights, what are the big things? You saw a lot of work around labor and employment. You know, there was a lot of discussion about labor's ascendancy in the Capitol, given the, you know, super duper majority. But you know, they were stymied on some things. But probably, you know, the highest profile bills, at least from our perspective, were these. So you had SB 525, which is the minimum wage for healthcare workers. The governor took a very long time to sign that because of the state impacts of paying these increased minimum wage to state employees and how much that would impact the state's fiscal situation. I'll get to that in just a moment. There's also minimum wage increases for fast food workers. You may recall that in 2022, FAST Act was passed in the state legislature, signed by the governor. And what it did is it created this council that would govern the fast food industry. The fast food industry responded by qualifying a referendum, basically putting that law on hold, and then going to the voters for the voters to decide in 2024 whether or not to keep that law on the books or not. Given that leverage, the industry was engaging with legislative leaders around basically a legislative fix. Is there some, you know, compromise? And this is what was reached, which is instead of this overarching large council, it was a minimum wage increase for fast food workers and some workforce workplace protections. This is a really tough fight. Legislation was introduced that basically, you know, was going to hold corporations responsible for any labor law violations of franchisees. So it was going to, you know, kill the franchise business in California. But ultimately, hopefully, this is a solution that will work, and we won't see a return to that level of brinksmanship. We had a SB 253, which is a climate change bill. Governor signed it. It requires a significant amount of new reporting for supply chains. Basically, it requires anybody who's producing a product and who's roped into cap and trade to quantify basically the carbon intensity of your supply chain. This is very, very tough, we think, for a range of reasons. There's no small business carve out. There's, you know, if you're in a supply chain to somebody who's reporting in the cap and trade program, you know, you may be not able or don't have the resources because you've never been required to report this. And then we're also concerned from the standpoint of like minority businesses and especially, you know, diverse business enterprises that are, you know, in some of these companies. When you think of utility companies, the oil and gas manufacturing, they have significant targets around disadvantaged and minority business enterprises in terms of their supply chain, and we're just concerned that those companies will not have the resources to comply with this law. We're actually working with the U.S. Chamber to challenge it in court, and the governor's actually asked for cleanup legislation from the legislature, even you know, before he signed it, signaled he wanted cleanup legislation. So it's pretty clear that this is not ideal. SB 799 is unemployment insurance for striking workers. What you had there was, you know, given the focus on some of like the labor issues, especially in the Southern California region. So you had, you know, the entertainment strikes, you had the hotel strikes. You know, there was this push to do unemployment for striking workers. What we saw here was just the fiscal concerns really outweighed anybody's issues with the policy. This did sail through. It was a late breaking bill, and it did get through both houses. But the governor ultimately vetoed it just because the state UI fund is under a significant amount of stress from the expanded benefits that were offered during the pandemic. It was already, you know, stressed before that, but the pandemic kind of additive benefits provided some additional stress. This would have also been a tax on every employer in the state of California. It doesn't matter if you have a unionized workforce, if your workforce is or is not on strike, the unemployment fund and its shortfalls are paid for by everybody who pays payroll taxes. So this would have been an additive component to every employer's payroll taxes. So luckily the governor did not sign that, actually vetoed that bill. This week, the Legislative Analyst's Office provided an update on the state's fiscal situation, and basically provided this. I mean, what we had seen really even prior to this fiscal year was a significant amount of surpluses in the state budget, driven largely from the investment income that was flowing in because of high returns in the stock market, IPO activity that cooled right around the time the pandemic was ending, but also a significant amount of influx of federal dollars. Now that we're seeing the economy kind of cool down, that IPO activity kind of cool down, the not seeing as much money flowing directly into the general fund from the federal government. The Legislative Analyst's Office now projects that over a 3-year fiscal year period, from the 22-23 fiscal year to the 24-25 fiscal year, that California will face a cumulative $58 billion budget deficit, and that's quite a swing. The deficits are really driven by slower revenue growth. I mean, the California budget is driven, really, it's like feast or famine. It's driven by the amount of income that high income earners make. And so if there isn't these, huge returns in the stock market that are realized, that people are actually realizing, if there isn't this IPO activity, then it really hurts the state budget. So this is going to be the backdrop for a lot of the legislative debates that are going to happen as with the legislature reconvenes in January. So with that, I want to switch over real quickly to our People's Voice poll, and I will try to go through a lot of this data quickly and leave some time for Q&A. I will caution you that some of this is going to be a little pessimistic. So sorry for starting your morning in this way. Don't want you to discourage you or depress you, but. So we did this poll in October. It's a part and parcel of our public affairs conference, and we put out major pieces of it in a series of communications following our public affairs conference in late October. It's a survey of about 1,000 voters, likely voters in the 2024 general election, again, conducted in early October. It's a margin of error of 3%. As you could look through this, you'll see certain findings may total more or less than 100% just because of rounding. And then the question that I get asked when I present this, so I'll just address it on the front end, is that, this is a professionally done poll by people who know how to do polls, and their job is to get the right demographic partisan balance. And so this is reflective of at least what the professionals can see of who is actually voting over the last few elections in California. So this is, not just a cherry-picked poll, but meant to really inform where voters really think things are. So we asked people, the very general, very, like a standard opening question on a poll. We asked them the right track, wrong track question. And you see that between 22 and 23, there's been a drop in people who think that the direction of the country is going in the right track. And you see that wrong track growing significantly. We asked folks. Yeah.
Excuse me, Nick, is there a different graphic? Did you switch to a different presentation? Because we're still seeing the California budget deficit projections.
Okay, hold on just one second. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Sorry, I forget that, you're not just generally, is that better? Can you see the,
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I forget that, what you're saying, if you just share one window is, I need to go back to Zoom school, I think, a little bit. I lost some of my tricks from the pandemic. so again, you see that direction of the country, direction of the state, back in 2022 had, you know, a majority saying state's on the right direction, on the right track. And this year, you're seeing that decrease. You're seeing that flip with a majority of voters now saying, you know, pretty sizable majority now saying that the direction of the state is on the wrong track. You know, this issue about, like, you know, the economy, how the economy affects the general public. We, you know, this isn't just, you know, theoretical, this is real. We ask people, you know, have you had to adjust your spending habits because of rising prices or economic conditions? And so 83% have changed their spending habits. And you see nearly half say they've changed their spending habits a lot. You know, compared to a year ago, say your household is better or worse economically. And you have 68% saying that they're worse off than a year ago economically. So we asked folks, hey, like, you know, how do you think, you know, what's the forward-looking statement? I mean, so often the economy is a confidence, you know, kind of game. It's the consumer confidence game. You know, how are people feeling? How are they spending? And what you see is, you know, folks are very much pessimistic. They said, you know, thinking a year ahead from now, do you think it's going to be better or worse? You know, 58% think it's going to be worse. And then we asked, you know, how likely is it that your personal economic situation is going to improve over the next year? And what you see is about 51% saying it's not very likely that that's going to happen for me. So again, some clear pessimism in the populace and in the voters. You know, this Cal exit question is, you know, one that's always top of mind. And frankly, as the California Chamber of Commerce, this is not something in terms of like we're promoting this perception, we're promoting this idea, we like this idea being out there. I mean, our job is to work for and work with and fight for business in the state. We don't want the people, we don't want companies to be leaving the state. But right now, as you see in this progression of, you know, significant increase in this question of my family would have a better future if we left California. Right now, we're at the point of, based on our polling, 3 in 5 Californians now think that they might find their better future elsewhere than in the state of California. So again, looking at 5 years, so not just a year from now, but, you know, project out a little bit further. Do you think California will be a better place to live or a worse place to live compared to today? And you see, you know, again, mixed results, but a plurality saying worse. And then we asked, you know, folks, hey, do you personally know anybody who's moved out of state for a job loss or for economic and cost of living issues? And we've got nearly 2/3 of respondents saying, yes, they know somebody personally. We asked people, you know, especially the screening question of, you know, do you have kids at home? And for those that did have kids, 66% agreed that like their children would have a better future outside of California. It's really sad. So again, you know, state of possibilities becoming a state of impossibility. You know, we asked, hey, are you and your family thought of leaving California? Have you given any consideration to that? And what you see is, you know, 57% saying, yeah, I have given it. And so why? And it's interesting because a lot of the, you know, heat over this, if you're watching, you know, certain cable news outlets, it's all about culture. And that is not the case. What you're seeing is people are moving because of economic conditions and cost of living. Culture is a very, very distant second in terms of what is motivating people to move out of the state. And then we asked, you know, do you agree or disagree with the statement that earning enough income to enjoy a middle-class life is becoming almost impossible in my part of California? And 90% agreed. We did actually do an interesting thought experiment, which I think, you know, folks in the mega regions like the Bay Area or the Los Angeles region, San Diego region might appreciate. And we kind of asked them like, hey, turn this on its head a little bit. Like there has been this exodus. We have seen people leaving. Is that maybe a good thing for your region, for your area? Do you think that's, you know, maybe, you know, less competition for that, you know, starter house purchase, less traffic on the freeway? Is that a good thing? And what we saw is voters basically said, no, that would not be a good thing. You know, people leaving the state is not a good thing, regardless of if that may incrementally, you know, benefit me in some way. We thought that was an interesting finding, and the first time we'd asked the question that way this year. So again, we asked folks, as the American dream slipped away, and again, you can see the progression of the pessimism around it, based on that we've done this poll for 9 years, and so this is kind of a 2018 and 2023 5-year look back, and you can see people are really saying that the American dream once held true, but it doesn't anymore, and that is a really frustrating thing to see. And then again, is that a California thing, or is that, a national trend? And when you ask the voters, they say it's a California thing. So it's easier to have to achieve the American dream in places that they're not California. Basically, 3/4 of respondents said, you can achieve it, but it got to be in a different state. So, we asked, okay, what is the problem here? So we asked, do you agree or disagree that California's fostered an unfriendly business climate, discourages growth, discourages high quality jobs? 65% agreed. We asked, California needs to do more to attract and retain businesses in the state. Nearly 90% agree with that statement. So this is really, what we're, coming down. This is where voters feel about this. This is not, while it aligns with our agenda, this is not necessarily our feelings. We're just reflecting back what the voters think. And then we asked, is the policies in Sacramento, have they done good? Have they done more harm? 54% say that the policies coming out of the Capitol have worsened the state, unfortunately. I'm going to switch through some of these because these are more like very specific issues. I just talked about this issue, which is critical issue, like crime, public safety. That is the homelessness, crime, public safety are the issues that we hear the most about from members. And frankly, it's an area that was not really something that would ever really be on our radar if you look back, even 6-7 years ago. But now you're seeing one that it's not just becoming a local issue, it is becoming the business issue on a range of fronts. It's how it impacts that consumer confidence, how it impacts people's perceptions, how it impacts commercial real estate in downtowns, and then just how it impacts just people doing business overall. So we asked folks, has crime increased in your area? And so 57% say it's increased either some or a lot. Nobody, 9% are saying that it's decreased, and I'd like to know where those folks live, because that would be a great place to maybe look into buying a house. So we asked, this question again, this gets back to the personal, question of hey, how has that impacted your daily life? And so respondents said, 44% said that it changed the way and where they shopped. So that is definitely an issue, especially as we think of this concern about retail theft going on throughout the state, and at times very brazen retail theft. We kind of wanted to dive a little deeper into how the folks, how the respondents felt about some of these issues. And so we asked them a series of questions about public safety. Asked them, read to them a series of statements and asked them whether they agreed or disagreed. And so fentanyl is obviously, top of mind. So, you've got, near universal belief that, there needs to be more needs to be done around the issue of that. The prison realignment, the criminal justice reform issues, that there is a perception that people are not doing their entire sentence, that they are getting out early, and voters feel like they're concerned about that, and they want folks to keep especially violent offenders in prison for their entire sentence. There's concern about prosecutors who refuse to enforce laws. There's concern about street crime and shoplifting, car theft. This is an interesting one. It's around homelessness, and I think those of you who've been active in this space know. I think there is a significant and even a valid disagreement between the folks who are the homelessness advocates and service providers, and folks who are really concerned about crime around whether or not homelessness actually drives criminal behavior. whether or not, the fact that there is street homelessness, is that driving some of this retail theft? Are the two actually linked together? Is it the homeless who basically doing these crimes? Again, I think there's, a valid debate being had about that we don't have all the data for. But I mean, from the perception side of voters is that homelessness and our inability to totally combat this homelessness crisis is driving crime in places. We got this issue, especially on retail, and you'll be hearing a lot about this year. There's a range of things happening at the state level, whether it's a business community trying to get together to get our hands around, retail theft and some of what we expect to be a flurry of legislation around it. There is now a select committee on retail theft that the new speaker, Speaker Rivas, impaneled late last year, and we're interested to see what they're going to do, what their work's going to look like. And so again, this issue of like stacking, because it's that if something doesn't, if you're not stealing at a certain level, it's $900-ish, then you're a misdemeanor, not a felony. And so can people stack misdemeanors to create that felony is definitely something that voters agree with. They want to see more police, more security presence at local retail establishments. I think this was an industry probably, again, on this question of statements, we said, hey, compared to other states and cities, crime is even worse in California. Well, it's a sizable folks saying, yes, I agree. I expected it to be near universal, and that just isn't the case. And so that tells you, especially if, folks have traveled, then, this is not just a California problem. All right, I'm going to switch back real quickly to my other presentation. And I'm going to try to end on a somewhat hopeful note and then open it up for questions. So just to give you one of the things that I like to track is this thing called the Edelman Trust Barometer. Edelman does a study every year about which sectors do people trust the most. And they do a worldwide public opinion research effort. And then they also oversample the largest economies in the world so that they can get a sense of like, where people stand in the United States and China and parts of Europe versus the rest of the globe. So it measures, the trust in business, government, media, NGOs. They've been doing it for over 20 years. And, I think the interesting results of this, or the results of this are very interesting and really, I think, crystallize why it's so important that all of you are engaged in your local chamber and the power really of the business community and expectations of the business community going forward. Again, I'm trying to end on a hopeful note, but I will tell you that this is a little pessimistic, which is respondents, this is worldwide. They said, they believe, that there's significant economic pessimism. Only 40% believe their families will be better off in 5 years. That's down 10 points year over year. And then this issue of division, this issue of like the partisan divide, the distrust of leadership, the distrust of institutions within our countries is really fueling a distrust of everything, the media, facts, what have you. And so it's really troubling that we're in this extreme pessimistic and polarized world, but hopefully there are some bright spots. So especially as representatives of a local business community, I think it's important, really to drive this home. So when you look at all of those sectors, government, NGO/nonprofit, or the media and business is viewed as the most competent, the most ethical, the most trusted. And it's actually improved its ethics scores year over year. The 62% trust business, and 51% trust government. So you see the significant trust gap in between what people think the business community is capable of and what they're saying versus how they feel about the government. Business is seen as really a stabilizing force. Because of that, the expectations of business are higher than ever, from your customers, from your employees, from your stakeholders, and it's interesting. They want business to not just be worried about their profits, but to really be thinking about how are we making a better world. How are we making a better community? And so whether it's addressing climate change, whether it's DEI initiatives, whether it's, fair compensation, those are all issues that are driving how people view, these businesses. In terms of like creating, solutions to some of these problems, a business government collaboration is seen as the most likely vehicle and the most likely partnership to actually effectuate change. Again, they want, business to be, the source of reliable information, be an advocate for truth, and then, try to impact, some of this pessimism going forward. It is very interesting that you'll hear this. I heard someone describe these findings. One of the co-founders of Axios, the news website, was describing it as, in an increasingly secular society, your employer is becoming a lot of things to you. It's becoming almost like your church, with the millennial generation and Gen Z wanting, and sometimes even trading out higher compensation to feel like what they're doing matters. It's becoming your vehicle for impacting your community, for finding your personal purpose. And then it's become, kind of a clarion for effectuating changes in communities. And so, business has a lot of expectations on it now, and especially given, some of these, but at the same time, business has to step carefully, because if you go all in on certain things, and we've seen it through, especially with some of the culture wars of the last few years, we've seen it where, there can be a backlash if business goes a little bit further, driven by what stakeholders or customers or employees are pushing them to do in certain spaces. And so there is even a risk that you could exacerbate some of this polarization if you go too far. But I would say, this is great news for the business community, because it's where we've always known, business is where common sense folks are. It's where, especially when I think of my partners and my stakeholders who are working in local chamber work, the chamber is best positioned to take advantage of these types of trends, because a chamber is where the community and business intersect. And so this is really a great opportunity, I think, for our local chamber partners to be those leaders, to look for those collaborative solutions going forward. And so, and I'll send this to Kim. I just have come up with like kind of things about like taking those findings, what could you do? What could you do locally? So, how can a chamber of commerce improve trust locally and local business, foster a sense of, competence and ethics within our community, be that trusted messenger for some of these problems, and really lift the business community up as being that place. How do you collaborate? Again, utilizing that statement that, a business government collaboration is seen as the best way to effectuate change. What are opportunities to look at things? And again, economic development, workforce development are great examples of ways that you can get involved. And then, responding to economic concerns, again, trying to get around some of this pessimism and trying to lift up the good news stories, and then maybe even talk about some of the work that are going on in the out of these top two kind of discussions. How do you boost local economic confidence? How do you really try to get at whether it's something that we all know and we all love, like a small business Saturday. How do we do small business Saturday for region wide for all businesses, that's boosting economic confidence all year long? How do we always do that? And then also, how are you supporting these businesses, responding to their needs so that they have staying power in a region? So with that, that was a lot. I tried to, definitely gave you some depressing middle, but tried to provide hopefully a glimmer of optimism going into an even year, which I know we are all really looking forward to all of those wonderful campaign commercials in an election year. But happy to answer any questions. Thank you for having me, and hopefully on half a cup of coffee, I made some sense this morning.
That was incredibly helpful and insightful, Nick. So I know I have one question. If you have questions, please raise your hand in the chat box, or let me know. Anthony Carnesecca messaged me that he has a question. If you could start us off, Anthony.
Yeah, Nick, thank you for the presentation.
Mhm.
I apologize if I missed it in the presentation. You talked a lot about you know, Cal exit and kind of California quality of life issues, which I think are very real issues, especially in higher wealth areas where the gap is ever widening. I am curious though, because I've heard data that says that there are a lot of people leaving, but there's still a lot of people coming. And
Mhm.
so I'd love to know if you have any data or if your organization has considered collecting data showing, you know, when people leave, are they actually finding a higher quality of life? Are they
Yeah.
actually finding, you know, because I think that always have this vision of the grass is always greener on the other side. And
Yeah.
people always think if they go to this state, you know, lower economic impacts, things are going to be cheaper, there's going to be jobs, and then maybe they go and there's no jobs. And it turns out it's just as expensive for a sandwich and they don't have In-N-Out where it's only $2 for a burger. Just kidding, everyone. You know, is there any way to quantify kind of that impact of like people leave, turns out it wasn't great and they come back, or you know, we're still drawing people in with the quality of life that we do have.
Yeah.
So sorry, that was a long-winded question.
No, I appreciate it, and I'll tell you this. So, I mean, again, this was a poll of public perceptions, not necessarily of you know, fact-based data around, you know, what that Cal exit looks like. The Public Policy Institute of California, PIPIC, has done a lot of work around this topic, and has you know, really tried to look at how this is you know, how this is working out and who is actually leaving. You know, I think what we've seen over the past few years is that what you have is people on you know, the biggest concern has been the high income earners, again, because of their impact to state finances. But what PIPIC has seen, I think in a study they put out in spring of this year, was that you are now starting to see middle class folks move out. And so what the concern is you're going to be left with, you know, folks who can afford to live anywhere and choose to live here, and the people who really do not make enough in terms of income level to do anything, and so we're just stuck. And that's a big concern. I mean, the fact that I mean, there is data to support that the outflow is a net outflow. I mean, in the last reapportionment, we lost a congressional seat for the first time because of our population reduction. And I will tell you, I mean, just anecdotally, this is not backed up by any data, but I mean, I have talked to a number of folks who have definitely acknowledged that people have to do their homework when they're thinking about one of these out-of-state moves. I mean, I had a slide in there about Prop 13. And Prop 13 is like a huge benefit to Californians that we don't always appreciate. When you're like looking at a relo, and especially like, you know, when you're thinking about like a Texas or a Nevada or, you know, some of these, you know, other states that try to, you know, publicize a more advantaged tax situation. Yes, you may have, you know, no income tax, or you may have no sales tax, and your house may cost less than a house in California, but your property taxes are sky high. So, I mean, what I have seen is, you know, and again, this is just more anecdotally, folks who are looking at this have started, I think, to look at it more critically. And I think that that's especially true given some of these poll findings when you're talking about, you know, why are you thinking of leaving the state? Is it culture, which is going to trump any, I don't mean like it was a Freudian slip, but is really going to overwhelm any economic considerations. It's purely economic considerations. And so when people are sitting down and really looking at these moves, I think, you know, they've got to look at it from that standpoint. I think people are doing a little bit more research now than they have. I think the outflows have slowed, at least from some reporting that I've seen, but they still exist. But I'll send Kim some resources, especially those PIPIC polls, so that she can circulate those.
That'd be great. Thank you. Other thoughts and questions? I know we have some great community thinkers here that I'm sure have more discussion or questions for you.
Is this a one-off survey or is it on a regular basis this is conducted?
We do it annually and we've done it for the last 9 years.
Okay.
That's why we have some of the trending built into it.
Built into it. Okay.
Kathy?
Thank you for this. And you're right. It's actually more negative than I expected and what I hear in the news every night. I guess the biggest concern for me is the lack of trust and how kids are growing up in a world where honesty and what you say, that you can say anything you want, you can hurt people, whether or not it's constructive. And I'm wondering, are elected officials, I'm assuming they're aware of this, some of them are at the root of the issue. What's happening in Sacramento as far as turning this around and getting some credibility in government?
No, I think I'll say this. I mean, the bottom line is that the makeup of the legislature is the makeup of the legislature because it reflects, Californians' outlooks. But I think what we've seen, and especially as you look at, some of these issue areas like homelessness, like retail theft, like criminal justice, some things related to these used to be third rails in California politics. We can't touch that, we'll upset this part of the coalition or we'll do this or that. I think now there is, at least we're seeing, and the proof will be in the pudding, whether it's performative or whether it really produces some actual policy that is going to change the direction of some of these trends. But we're seeing more engagement, more activity around them than we've seen in quite some time. And so I think, one of the things that we're going to be like really, harping on Kim and her colleagues throughout the state with our local businesses is that you all, for us to be successful here, you all have to keep the pressure on back home on these legislators. So we can come into their office and we can tell them, hey, this is bad because of these, fact-based reasons. But until they're like confronted with, being in the grocery store and seeing you and hearing that you're upset about something, or going to their favorite restaurant and hearing about how, hey, like we're going to have to cut hours because of this new labor law requirement. That's more powerful than anything. And so I think we just have to do a better job of and I mean this collectively, of not just assuming that somebody up here is handling it, is handling their, or that, there really isn't any utility in, addressing some of your concerns with these legislators. I think it's going to be incredibly impactful, and that's what we're going to try to do next year, is really cultivate some of these small business stories so that we can reflect back what the true impact of some of these policies are, because that's where we will begin to see some change, we hope.
Mimi.
All right. As a Californian who was born and raised in Texas, I'm sad, like, for my kids. My son, he worked part-time at the Lego store at Valley Fair, and I was worried for him because of the theft, right? And I think that it'll be very interesting to see the research, whether it is homelessness that's causing more, or is it these really, really, very strategic or well-organized crime groups that are going out and stealing. They're training people to go out. So I think that'll be very interesting. And as that research comes out, that'll help the business community to, for me personally, I was very sad shopping at Target the other day, and I saw all these cabinets, locked cabinets with the packaged underwear undershirts because of the Christmas season, that they didn't want those things to be stolen and walk out. They're locked up. Basic foundational garments are locked up. So I do think that, that kind of tells me that the American dream is broken, and I've felt that for a few years. Okay, so separate from that, having been a business owner for the last 16 years, I just went full cycle. I started out in 2007. 2008 was when the economic downturn happened. So then fast forward, COVID happened. And so as a small business owner of a gym, which the governor said was going to be a super spreader, I'm here to say I learned a lot during the pandemic, and I actually grew. I learned a lot, and so I think that I'm wondering if there's kind of a course correction that's happening amongst the business community, because if you were like a restaurant that had a cash flow of 2.5 weeks, cash flow for a restaurant, how are you going to make it through the pandemic if you don't have basic business savings, right?
Yeah.
If you were already kind of on the precipice. So I'm wondering if these last few years, there's sort of a course correction. And so things like we all learned, we all had to adjust and pivot. And so, I learned that the basic fundamentals in business, make sure you have a savings, make sure that your pricing is right. You're having to learn that you're working with fewer customers, which means if you're going to be at a higher price point, you have to make sure your service is excellent in order to be able to command that. So as every small business or business has to adjust and learn and adapt to the new environment post-COVID, well, COVID is still here, right? But we're all having to adapt. So there's sort of a course correction that's, I feel like, it's happening. And we may see that for quite a while, but my business just sold, but I sold a business that still the formula. You build it up, make it profitable, and sell it at top dollar.
Yeah.
Okay. So does that not give hope to the community? We still have to keep to the business foundational elements and then keep going. So I'm inspired by Chris. She's a brand new business owner in the downtown Los Altos. Welcome, Chris. We're all here to help you. We're all here to help you to be successful.
Oh, thank you so much.
I love that, Mimi. And I'll just say, and the other side of the house, the WACE side of the house, there was a significant amount of research that was done a few years back around, what is a Chamber of Commerce? What's a Chamber of Commerce to its community? What does the local business community mean? And so, this is one of my kind of stock foundational things, which is, what the research came back with, and again, this is kind of consumer research and market research, is a thriving community is built on a foundation of successful businesses. So often, what happens is the business community is think of as this thing over here. You know what I mean? Providing jobs, providing some tax base, but it's this thing over here. When what I think the pandemic really drove home is how much of our identity of where we live and who we are and what our culture is for that place is tied to the businesses that are in that region. And so, to your point, how often, did we grieve the loss of a retailer, a restaurant that did not make it during the pandemic, that was a beloved place? I know I did in, my hometown. But I think it just, drives home, this really, core concept of, thriving communities built up on a foundation of successful businesses. You don't have, movies aren't made in Hollywood anymore. They're made in Georgia or Vancouver or somewhere else that's got great tax incentives. But you can't separate, movie making from Hollywood. In your backyard, you can't separate, though semiconductor manufacturing has gone down in Northern California and is happening outside of the country. You can't separate Silicon Valley from the silicon chip. So, I mean, business isn't just this thing over here. It's part of how we define our regions, part of how we define our collective culture. And so I think it's really important that, you know, that maybe a benefit of the pandemic is that, you know, some lawmakers, some elected officials, some leaders saw how integral to their communities, their businesses, especially their small businesses, are.
One last question for Nick before we close. Oh, Anthony. Go ahead,
Nick,
Anthony.
what's the most optimistic thing you're looking forward to in 2024? Let's try and end on like a positive. What's the big thing you're looking forward to as a potential exciting thing coming in 2024 for us?
You know, I mean, like, one, I'm a politics geek, so like, you know, election days are like my Christmas. So I mean, even regardless of what happens, I always love an election because it's like Christmas morning to me. But really, I mean, I think the thing that I'm most excited about more professionally is, you know, this launch of this new capability that we have here at CalChamber around small businesses, small business advocacy. And I'm really excited about, I think, the resources that we're going to put into it, the message and the feedback that we've already gotten from it, and really looking forward to trying to find really unique ways of activating the state small business community to really share their experiences with their lawmakers, to bring that voice into the conversation, because I don't think it's been there for some time. And I think people need to hear it. And the work that goes on and the effort to build a business, I mean, just to, you know, kind of reflect back, you know, Mimi's experience, I mean, it's your heart and soul. And, you know, people need to understand it. People need to respect it. I mean, I didn't have capital on the line, but I ran an organization, you know, myself, you know, just like him. I ran a chamber. I had a payroll to meet every 2 weeks. I had taxes to pay. And when the pandemic hit, I mean, as an entity that functioned, was an end user of people, and people were no longer in supply because they were staying home, that impacted our business. And so I think because we went through the exact same thing that our members went through, that made us have more of a corollary to it. And I just really want to find ways of making sure that our lawmakers are respecting the work that you all do every day, putting your business, your capital, your butt on the line. And that's something that I'm really looking forward to. And I think that it's going to have really positive results because you all are the best messengers. Us hired hands, you know, we can talk a good game and we can, you know, try to, you know, do our machinations and things, but I think the most authentic voice is what a legislator hears, or any policymaker, any elected official hears from somebody in their community that they know that they can respect and trust.
We really appreciate that, Nick, and are happy to support you, you know, in any way we can. I'd love to continue to stay connected and appreciate your keeping us informed on all these topics. The data was really incredibly insightful, eye-opening, sobering, of course, as well, but it's something that we need to hear, but happy to help provide case studies and, you know, examples from our business community and support you in any way we can in that endeavor.
And we will definitely take you up on that.
You're a great partner. So I have just 3 really quick announcements. One, our holiday party is this evening. So tonight from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Courtyard Marriott Jingle and Mingle. So I'd love to see you there. Wanted to mention the next government affairs session for January 3rd will be representatives from SCORE, mentoring organization, business mentors, and then the Silicon Valley SBDC, as well, to share information with all of our businesses, bring them up to date on practices and resources that are available, but especially helpful for new members as well. And then just wanted to mention that we've started sales for the next issue of the Los Altos magazine. Advertising in that, reach out to our office so that you can reserve your spot. Thank you, Nick. Really appreciate your joining us. Thanks to everyone for tuning in this morning. And don't hesitate to reach out to our office if we can support you in any way.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, bye.